Winston Churchill once said that the history of man is the history of war. Wars are killing tens of thousands of people around the world every year. Yet the most important war of all goes unseen. Discover how spiritual armies are fighting for control of human minds. Next, on The Key of David with Gerald Flurry.
Greetings, everyone. I have started a series on the book of Mystery of the Ages by Herbert W. Armstrong. Last week I gave a message on the Who and What is God, which is the first mystery of that book, but I want to give a series, and so I'm going to continue in that book. Today I'd like to talk about the second mystery, about the angels and the evil spirits. Now, if you look at your Bible, throughout the Bible, it talks about angels and evil spirits or demons. Just throughout, all kinds of verses about these beings, and yet the world is totally deceived about these angels and demonic beings. They're deceived about that. The first thing that God created was not the earth and the universe. It was not humankind. It was the angels. The very first things that He created, and he could have taken millions or even billions of years to do it, but I don't think He took that long. But certainly there are millions of angels and perhaps even billions of them. And many of them, of course, became fallen angels. But did you know that God created those angels individually? They have a mind, and it's of greater capacity and ability than that you'll find in human beings. In Hebrews 2 and verse 7 it says that even Jesus, when He came to this earth as a human being, was made a little lower than the angels. I mean, these are mighty, powerful beings that God created. The greatest beings He could create by fiat. Certainly Lucifer was. Now, that's how great they are. But can your mind fathom that God created perhaps even billions of angels and produced them individually, created them individually with all that capacity? Because they don't reproduce like human beings. And I think there's, of course, the main reason for that, I'm absolutely certain from the Bible, or what you read in the Bible, is that they weren't created to produce sons and daughters as the human beings are, because they were never created to be in the family of God. Now, these beings, so brilliant, so great, and yet your potential is far greater. Can you imagine that? Your potential is far greater. God has something really spectacular going on this earth, and mankind is almost totally mystified by it and in mystery about it. So, if you think about Lucifer turning away from God, and then, of all things, he persuaded 1/3 of the angels to rebel with him. Now, you talk about a great being. That was the greatest being of all that God created by fiat. He didn't build character in them the way He's doing in mankind. It's a different process. Jude verses 6 and 7 says that they have left their first estate. They've left it. Well, they didn't. They rebelled against God. Notice Isaiah 14 and verse 12. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How are you cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? The Revised Standard Version translates it, how are you cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low? He got control of the political and military leaders. He's always done that throughout history. and especially in the Gentile world, particularly in that world. Lucifer means the shining star of the dawn, or the bringer of light. Can you imagine this awesome being created to help God bring more light to the universe through angels at this time? He wants to bring light to this world, but the world wants darkness. That's what he talked about in John 1. That's why they killed the Son of God, because they were in darkness. Well, verse 14 continues this, and Lucifer said, Satan at this time, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation, God's heavenly throne, in the midst of the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Can you imagine that kind of vanity in a being that God created? Well, he turned away from God. You see, he had to make a choice. As human beings have to make a choice. And God says, choose life. Choose life. Don't choose death. Verse 15, yet you shall be brought down to hell, or the Hebrew Sheol, to the sides of the pit. Well, the next verse goes on to say that everything was just great until iniquity or lawlessness was found in him. Do you see lawlessness in America today, and in Canada, and in all around this world, but especially serious problems in the nations of Israel, which is all explained in our book on the United States and Britain in Prophecy. Let me read you something Mr. Armstrong wrote in Mystery of the Ages. At this juncture, a truth must be explained, almost never understood. God creates a principle of duality. When God created the earth and other planets, this system of duality was involved. The same principle of duality applies to the creation of the angels. And that duality applies to a rebellion of the angels when they tried to overthrow God before Adam, and when they try to overthrow him again just before the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's all dual. So Isaiah 14 is just a prophecy of what's going to happen in the end time. Isaiah, after all, was written for this very end time we're living in now. You can read that in Isaiah 30. Notice more about this duality. Mr. Armstrong writes, notice here once again the principle of duality. Isaiah 14 verses 12 through 14 applies to a time prior to the creation of the first human, Adam. But in Revelation 12 and verse 7 and in Daniel 12 and verse 1, Satan at the end of the 6,000 years allotted to his rule on earth's throne tries once again to seize God's throne in heaven. See, again, it's all duality. It was prophesied to happen in this end time, and the same effort by Satan to take over God's throne. Now, that's how mad he is in his reasoning. He thinks he can actually take over the throne of his Creator. That is the ultimate insanity. But let me read to you now this dual ending, which also shows Satan trying to take over God's throne. Notice verse 7 of Revelation 12, and we'll read a couple of verses here. And there was war in heaven. Now this has happened just recently. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now here we are at the very end time, and Satan, of all things, is going to try, or did try, to conquer God again, and that happened recently. And we believe that we can prove to you that it happened in 1986 and probably on January the 16th. If you read and request my book on Malachi's message and read and study it, you'll see how that all happened. And also we have a big thick book on raising the ruins that my son wrote, and it also explains this to you, how it all happened. How Satan tried to, of course, take over the throne of God, but then when he couldn't do that, he attacked the true church of God and destroyed it for the most part, turning 95% of God's people away from God. Now that's how powerful this being is, and yet people scoff at the devil today. Can you imagine that? This is in your own Bible. These are not my words. These are the words of God. Notice verse 12. Here's the end result of it in this rebellion anyhow on earth. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, even the sea. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has but a short time. Yeah, it's about over. No more attempts to take over God's throne. But 1/3 of God's angels, imagine that, millions, and that in itself could be billions, but certainly millions of these angels were persuaded by the devil to turn away from God, and this world became a violent world. There'd never been any violence in the world until Satan rebelled. God and the Son have lived peacefully for all eternity. But now the nations of Israel have been attacked first after Satan attacked God's own church. Let me just mention this to you where it says, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. It's not just about Israel. God certainly is going to punish Israel first, or the nations of Israel. In this time, they will be punished first. And then he'll move on to the rest of the world. It's about the inhabitants of the earth. You're about to see that happen. It's all building toward that, and these leaders you see leading today, a number of them, are going to be leading at the very return of Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ will personally destroy them. Now that is an amazing phenomenon that we all need to be aware of. Satan sees his time is short. Well, what is going to happen if his time is short? That's why he's full of wrath. Yet then you see that wrath on this earth today, and yet people would never, in most cases, attribute that to Satan the devil. But it is caused mainly by the devil, because this world worships Satan the devil. 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4. But what is the first thing that Satan does when he's cast down to this earth? What is the first thing he does? Well, you need to take a look at this, because he attacked God's church and turned 95% of them away from God, but then there were 5% left, protected by the righteous angels, and they go out and do God's work, protected by the righteous angels, guided by them, led by Michael, the highest the highest ranking angelic being today. And he protects Israel, our spiritual Israel, the church, but he also will protect the nations of Israel if they'll let him. He's there to do just that, but they too are in rebellion. Now that is all outlined in your Bible and in Mystery of the Ages, and you need this book. I'm telling you, it really is a synopsis of the entire Bible. It gives you an outline of the entire Bible, and there's no book on this earth except the Bible that is more important. That is my view, and it was Mr. Armstrong's view. And I think once you understand it, really understand it, it will be your view. It is going to be taught to this world very shortly, and God is getting a people ready to teach this world the truth of God. Most people that have lived never, ever knew God. And that's about to change through even some resurrections. Verse 13, notice this though. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman. That's a type of God's church. Here, it's a type of any church, but in this case, it's God's church, which brought forth the man-child, or Christ. So, the first thing Satan did, the very first thing he did, was to attack God's church. He couldn't conquer God. Now he thinks, well, he can conquer God's church, and he did conquer 95% of them, but he couldn't conquer the other 5% because they were protected from this great archangel Michael. And nobody is going to overthrow Michael unless it would be God himself. That isn't going to happen. But notice Daniel 12 and verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which stands for the children of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time your people shall be delivered. Now, every one that shall be found written in the book, God is going to deliver and protect his people throughout all these turbulent times coming upon the world, if their name is found written in the book. And that is what is required. God will accept anybody who turns and repents and gives themselves to him. He will give them great blessings. And if they become converted, this is the kind of protection that they will receive. And then he goes on to say they're going to shine like the stars forever and ever. They're going to shine like the stars you see up in the galaxy forever and ever. Do you really believe that? How many people really believe God? I mean, this is such an enormous potential. Men usually scoff at it. They won't believe their own Creator, and they won't believe His inspired Bible. And what a sad commentary that is. That's why we have all these problems on this earth today. That's why we have them. Michael certainly would be protecting three nations in particular today if they would just let him, the birthright nations and the scepter nation. But if you look at the first chapter of Hebrews, it talks about these angels, the righteous angels today, being just really secret messengers of God to serve the saints, those 5% that didn't rebel or have repented and given their lives to God and are doing His work. Ephesians 6 says it stated that our contentions and strivings are in fact not with other human people, Mr. Armstrong wrote, but against, quote, principalities, against powers. This is verse 12 of Ephesians 6. Against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness or evil spirits in high places on this earth. Can you believe that? They rule this world. Satan is the god of this world. He has deceived the whole world. I just read that to you in Revelation 12 and verse 9. In Ephesians 2 and verse 2, it states, according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, Satan, the spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. The prince of the power of the air, he broadcasts through the air, just like the television signals and the radio signals. He really just fills the air with his hostile spirit. If he can get anybody interested, and he reaches them through moods and attitudes and feelings And man, can He really work on people today. They come as a gift package for Him. Many of them are full of hostility, full of hatred, full of all kinds of bitterness. And Satan can get to a person like that and persuade them and move them like you can't even imagine. Now that's in your Bible. You see, just because they're invisible, they're a mystery. But there's a lot you don't understand about electricity, and a lot of it you certainly can't see. And yet, you know the reality of it is there, don't you? The same is true of God and the angels and all of that, if we'll just open our minds to the truth of God. All we need to do is open our minds. In the 25th chapter of Exodus, you could read that later yourself, but it talks about these covering cherubs that had their wings over God's throne, a type of God's throne anyhow. And one of them was Lucifer. These were the highest ranking angelic beings. There were three of them in the beginning: Lucifer and Michael and Gabriel. Now there's only Michael and Gabriel. Lucifer rebelled. He had to choose. God makes us choose so we can build some character. And if we can't build character, we don't have any future with God. It's that simple. This world has no character to speak of. They don't want God's character. They don't want to become perfect as their Father in heaven is perfect. Matthew 5 and verse 48. They don't want to do that. See, God says in Hebrews, He never did say that you are my son, this day have I begotten you. To what angel did He say, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies a footstool for your feet? Then in verses 13, 14, are not all angels merely spirits in the divine service, commissioned for the benefit of those who are to inherit salvation? They're here to serve us and help us receive salvation and become far superior to what they are today. Now, listen, I mean, this is breathtaking. This is something that ought to just overwhelm us. Even the angels, when they saw this originally, in Job 38, it says, when they saw the universe created along with the earth, after they were created, they just shouted for joy. They knew they were going to have a part in that. To what extent, we don't know, but they probably understood quite a lot of God's plan, as we do today. You could certainly think that, but they did understand that they were going to have a test, and God was going to put 1/3 of them on this earth to see if the angels could really rule the earth and the universe. Well, 1/3 of the angels failed. At that time, God realized that only He could be trusted to rule the universe, rule in the universe with Him. And so He decided to recreate Himself in man. That's right, sons of God. That's what it means, born into the very family of God, sons. We have family on this earth because it's a God-plane relationship. It's a type of the God family. Marriage is a God-plane relationship. It's a type of our marriage to Jesus Christ. That is, those first fruits that will come out and serve God before the second coming are going to be the bride of Jesus Christ. Can you even comprehend that? I tell you, it is the most wonderful truth you could imagine, and you can comprehend it if you choose to. God will see to it that you do. But you can see how angels have worked throughout the Bible, throughout history, and this book describes that and gives you all the scriptures that you really need to study. And they even appeared before men like Abraham and Moses and Gideon and all kinds of servants of God as human beings. And usually those angels manifested themselves as human beings. But what a wonderful future that God has given those angelic beings who were loyal to God, they just shouted for joy when they saw what God wanted them to do. And now they failed, so God is going to use, well, human potential to do and fulfill that transcendent potential that He gave to the angels. And that is to beautify this universe that was damaged greatly by Satan's rebellion. And this earth was wrecked by him when he rebelled, and God had to renew the face of the earth. These are wonderful truths, and we need to understand them. And this is a book like no other you'll read. Until next week, this is Gerald Flurry. Goodbye, friends.
Winston Churchill once said that the history of man is the history of war. Wars are killing tens of thousands of people around the world every year. Yet the most important war of all goes unseen. Satan's sole purpose is to destroy. In 1986, he lost a battle for universe rulership. As a result, God cast him and his demon army down, confining them to earth. Request Gerald Flurry's free book, Malachi's Message, to learn why Satan's first target for destruction on this planet was God's church. Malachi's Message is a story about God's church going off track and what God did to intervene in the tragedy. Prove where God is working today. Satan has destroyed spiritual Israel, God's church, and is in the process of destroying physical Israel, including America, Britain, and the Middle East Jews. Yet the world scoffs at even the existence of the devil. To most, Satan is a cartoon or the punchline of a joke. Request our free reprint article, Satan's Power, to learn the truth about this malicious being. Understand the tactics that have allowed Satan to deceive the entire world. Discover how to fight the devil and win. God created millions of immortal, majestic angels, each with a unique personality and set of skills. They are the greatest beings that God can instantaneously create. Request your free copy of Lesson 18 from the Herbert W. Armstrong College Bible Correspondence Course to learn the tragic history of the angels. What caused many of them to rebel? Why are the righteous angels fighting against the fallen angels today? For answers to these questions and more, request Lesson 18, The Stars of Heaven. All Key of David literature is free of charge at no cost or obligation to you. Request Malachi's Message, Satan's Power, and The Stars of Heaven. Order now.